continue. Awesome. And then I am going to enable a live transcript. All right, great. And then in the chat, oh, okay, that's Holly. All right, so Tess, are you comfortable introducing the topic of land acknowledgement? If not, then either I could do it or someone else could.
Yes, actually my team, including Kim and Chris, will give a short presentation for 15 minutes about land acknowledgements, but I would love to start off. Marlena, if you have a few words about centering the margins and about gathering here today, and then we can jump into our presentation.
Okay, wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marlena Duncan, Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion. And thank you all for joining us today for our Centering the Margin series. This is our first one for the fall semester. And Centering the Margins is a time and a space for us to have informal dialogue around the unique experiences related to diverse communities. The series intentionally centers on the narratives of silenced communities and aims to create an educational space for participants to discuss the systemic barriers that impact marginalized groups. So we really strive to create community, bring attention to topics that are normally not discussed, and normalize some of the factors that impact groups that are marginalized here and beyond UMass Chan. So really am looking forward to our conversation today around establishing a land acknowledgement here. And I'm going to pass it over to Tess to get us started with the presentation.
Thanks, Marlena. And Kim's going to be starting off today.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to first share my screen. And can you now see the slides, Tess? Yes, okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim McKenzie. With me today are Tess Greinock and Christine Shosted. Tess and I are research data and scholarly communications librarians, and Chris is the archivist here at the Lamar Cedar Library. Now, earlier this year, we were asked to research and put together a resource on drafting a land acknowledgement for UMass Chan Medical School. And we're going to talk to you today a bit about that research that we did. But before we get started, we have a small activity for everyone. Tess is putting a link into the chat that we'd like you all to visit. Native Land is a site that allows you to enter an address, and it will show you what Indigenous tribes have traditionally lived on those lands. So please go ahead and enter the address of wherever you are right now, and let us know in the chat then what you find out, the name of the tribe or the tribes who originally lived on that land. Okay, we're seeing a lot of answers of Nipmuc, Wampanoag, Pawtucket, Wampanoag. Yes.
Yeah, so we have our community is spread out over a lot of Massachusetts, and I think probably some people are coming from Rhode Island and New Hampshire.
When I looked at that map myself, I was surprised that the Pawtucket does not correspond to Rhode Island. It's actually in sort of northern Massachusetts. I live in Providence, which is right next to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. It's interesting. Wonderful. So thank you everyone for joining us in that activity. So for the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to discuss the importance of a land acknowledgement. Get that slides going here. So discuss the importance of a land acknowledgement. We're going to give you some examples of land acknowledgements from other schools in our area And finally, a brief history of the Nipmuc, which are the people, as many of you have just found out, are the people that are indigenous to the area around Worcester. So to start a discussion on the importance of a land acknowledgement, a brief definition to get started would be helpful. So a land acknowledgement is a statement that formalizes the recognition of the indigenous peoples who first inhabited the land on which our current cities and towns now occupy. So what does this do in essence? Because it's a recognition of the historical inhabitants of the land. It's a recognition of their forced removal from their ancestral homes. But it's also a recognition of the descendants of those peoples who continue to live and work and take part in the community. So this map should now look familiar to everybody. It provides a visual of the indigenous peoples who historically populated the southern New England region. And to situate us a bit, UMass is right about here, right in the middle of the ancestral lands of the Nipmuc people. And Tess is going to tell you more about the history of the Nipmuc in a little bit, but I'd like to highlight that the tribe was recognized by the state of Massachusetts in 1976, but was denied federal recognition in 2004. Currently, the tribal reservation land, the Hassanamiska Reservation, is a 3-acre plot located down here in Grafton. But the Nipmuc Nation is still very much present throughout the area. In the 2010 census, 0.61% of the population of the city of Worcester self-reported as identifying as American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 1.25% of the population in this 01604 zip code, which covers this whole area here just south of the medical school. It's important to note that many would also self-identify as African American or white, as well as American Indian, Alaskan Native in this type of demographic question.
And Kim, I just wanted to make sure we recognize and acknowledge Chief Hawley, who's on the Zoom call with us. I just noticed that she's.
Yes, she is. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, so why would a land acknowledgement be something that the medical school should consider? In the Impact 2020 strategic plan, UMass Medical pledges to take on a more meaningful and visible leadership role in promoting health and wellness of special populations in the central Massachusetts region. And as we mentioned before, part of that population does include Native Americans. In a 2020 commentary titled Flipping the Script Towards Health Equity, a Call for Native Land Acknowledgement, McCabe, Matta, and Parker make the point that acknowledging the historical basis of health disparities is an important step toward health equity. And a land acknowledgement is a meaningful step for UMass in reaching out to this community and in the education of future physicians, as well as being part of the strategic mission to deploy new and enhanced partnership approaches that will help us to more effectively improve health and wellness in the communities in which we live and work. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk about land acknowledgement examples.
Thank you, Kim. So for land acknowledgement examples, we looked at Worcester area colleges and universities. We looked at other UMass campuses, also some of the top NIH-funded institutions and area medical schools. We have 3 examples we'd like to show you. Our first is from a local college, Quinsigamond Community College, and their statement reads, "We want to acknowledge that we gather as Quinsigamond Community College on the traditional land of the Nipmuc, past and present. While a land acknowledgement statement is an important initial step and not enough, it is a necessary decolonial practice that promotes Indigenous visibility and social justice, reminding us that we are on settled Indigenous land. We condemn the unjust deeds done in the past and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Indigenous people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We commit to continuing to work for peace and reconciliation and to be better neighbors and caretakers of the land we inhabit." Our next is from one of our sister campuses, University of Massachusetts, Boston, whose statement reads, "We wish to acknowledge that the University of Massachusetts, Boston is situated upon the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts First Nations. We pay respect to the elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates our commitment to working to dismantle the systems of oppression that have displaced Indigenous peoples and the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. And our last example is from...
Hi, Cheryl and everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello? Our last example is from Boston University
We
School
can
of
hear you.
Medicine. We acknowledge that Boston University is on what was originally the territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We respectfully note that Indigenous peoples were stewards of the land and sea where BUMC resides. We regret that Indigenous peoples were brutally subjected to genocide and removal from this area. We pledge to honor the rich traditions of the Indigenous peoples of the U.S. with gratitude by pursuing our activities with respect for life in all its forms and manifestations. So now I will turn it over to Tess, who will give you a brief history of Nipmuc Nation.
Thank you, Chris. I was hoping that Chief Cheryll Holley would be here to say a few words. I think she got disconnected.
Oh, did she? Okay, because I thought I saw her show up briefly.
Okay. I will proceed. In the meantime, the following history that we put together of the Nipmuc Nation and Nipmuc peoples is gathered from the Nipmuc Nation and Hassanamasco Indian Museum websites and a documentary entitled Pakachoag, Where the River Bends, which Chief Hawley has been involved in all of those projects. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us and the wider community. And so today I just have a very quick summary, and I would encourage you to read more, and we'll be sharing some links to some more resources as well. So to give you a brief overview, Nipmuc is one of the several tribes of southern New England, as Kim was showing you on the map, and as you saw when you were searching nativeland.ca. And Nipmuc are primarily inhabited the modern day central Massachusetts, northeastern Connecticut, and northern Rhode Island area. And in Worcester itself, there were 3 villages, Tateset, Pakachoag, and Wigwam Hill, where UMass Medical School is located today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we are very likely sitting or standing, if you're on UMass Medical campus, on archaeological artifacts and quite possibly burial grounds, either beneath our feet on the campus or very nearby. So to give you a sense of where these 8 square miles that were depicted in that previous historical map are located in present day Worcester, I did an approximation of the coordinates on from the historical map on a map of modern day Worcester, which you see here. And so those 3 villages, I mentioned that Wigwam Hill is sort of where UMass Medical School is right now, but Tateset was located in the Tatnuck neighborhood, and Pakachoag is now the current site of the College of Holy Cross. So these 3 villages are what English settlers encounter in the Worcester area in 1667 to 1673, when English settlers first move to the Worcester area and settle in Quinsigamond. And these plots are surveyed and distributed amongst the European settlers. And in 1674, Daniel Gookin obtained a deed to 8 square miles of land in Quinsigamond for 12 pounds of New England money, which is approximately $2,000 in today's currency. Hura Wenonit, also known as Sagamore John of Pakachoag, and Winascocha, also known as Sagamore Solomon of Tateset, signed the deed, which was witnessed by 4 other Nipmucs. But only 2 coats and 4 yards of cloth, which are worth about like 26 shillings or 1.3 pounds, were provided as down payment, and with the remaining payment promised to be delivered in 3 months. But it's unknown whether the remaining payment was provided in the end. But regardless, it was a terrible deal and terribly unfair. In 1674, Pakachoag was established as a new praying town with the arrival of Reverend John Eliot, whose aim was to convert the Nipmucs living in the area. And this increased tensions as well. And King Philip's War in 1675 would bring these tensions between the settlers and the Nipmuc people and other tribes to a head. In the summer of 1675, Nipmucs aided in raids on Brookfield and Mendon. And then in August, all American Indians in Massachusetts were restricted to 5 praying towns by Massachusetts law. And if caught, any Nipmuc outside these 5 praying towns were killed or interred on Deer Island, a deforested island in Boston Harbor, where many perished due to exposure that winter. The war lasted until 1678, when the casualties suffered by Nipmuc and tribal allies outnumbering colonial losses more than 3 to 1. Many Nipmuc combatants that survived were sold into slavery, and some were placed under house arrest. Some Nipmucs, including Sagamore John, did manage to escape, luckily, but the losses were devastating. And due to the conflict during King Philip's War, the English settlers had abandoned Quinsigamond settlement twice, once in 1675 and the next year in 1676. Slowly, the English settlers and the Nipmuc learned to live together, and Worcester was settled for the third and final time in 1713. Over the decades that followed, more and more Nipmucs moved into the growing towns, and due to the shortage of Nipmuc men, Nipmuc women began to marry non-natives, primarily African Americans. And up until the Massachusetts Indian Enfranchisement Act of 1869, Nipmucs, along with other Native American peoples in Massachusetts, were considered wards of the state, with guardians assigned to manage their lands and debts. So through this act in 1869, Nipmucs in Massachusetts were granted state citizenship, but this also opened lands for sale, which were previously set aside for Native American peoples. So many lost their homes. The Hassanamisko Nipmuc tribal government was finally recognized by the state of Massachusetts in 1976 through Executive Order 126. And the Nipmuc Nation was then created in 1995 as a collective of the existing Nipmuc bands and other Nipmuc people not enrolled in a band. Thus, 20 years after the executive order, Hassanamisko joined the Nipmuc Nation, making the nation state recognized as well. And the Nipmuc Nation petitioned for federal recognition, as mentioned before, in 1984. And in 2001, moving into the 2000s, right on the UMass Medical School doorstep, 3 machoons or dugout canoes were rediscovered in Lake Quinsigamond, and the Nipmuc Nation plans to excavate and preserve these artifacts. Members of the Nipmuc Nation continue to live and work in the Worcester area, and many members have also worked and continue to work at UMass Medical School. So to find out more about and support Native Americans in your community, we recommend visiting these sites linked on the slide. And I'm also going to put these links in the chat. And now I'd like to turn it over, or sorry, Marlena.
Oh no, I was just gonna let you know that Chief Hawley is back.
Awesome. Yes, I was gonna, Chief Hawley, if you wanted to say a few words and correct any of my history.
No. Well, I just want to say, Katakokwa that the Sawa Cheryll Holley, Ka Neoko Sunsqua Nipmuc. And what that means is good afternoon. My name is Cheryll Holley, and I'm the chief of the Nipmuc Nation and the Hassanamisko Band of Nipmuc Indians. And as you all have heard, my people have lived in this area for thousands of years. Our original territories encompasses central Massachusetts, parts of Rhode Island, Connecticut. As you saw on that map, how the places overlapped each other, different tribal areas, it's because we didn't really have boundaries like they do now, fences and lines that artificially divide lands. Everything was sort of fluid and overlapping. So Nipmuc is an Algonquin-speaking, state-recognized tribe made up of multiple bands, both now and historically. At the time of contact with Europeans, as you heard on the presentation, there were at least 3 villages here in Worcester, probably 4, a 4th near Indian Lake. And Worcester is not only the home of my ancestors, but of many Nipmuc people today. There are like multiple generations of Nipmucs living right here in Worcester, right there on University campus with you all, here at Hanneman with me. So this land is our home. It has always been, and we hope it'll always be. And we think it's a good thing to acknowledge that. Land acknowledgements can be difficult for us because, you know, in this time of day, everybody's trying to sort of prove that they can diversify or they can support people that are different from them. and promote diversity activities in their companies. And sometimes a land acknowledgement is just that little checkbox for them. And so my tribe, we prefer to have a relationship with the people that we assist with land acknowledgements. In the case of the med school, like I said, many of us have worked there or still work there or work at the med center. We've worked with researchers in the past on health issues. So the Nipmucs, we have a very high incident of diabetes and an equally high high blood pressure rate. In the last 10 years or so, our type 2 diabetes has turned into type 1 in our children, which troubles us greatly. And we started a food justice or a food sovereignty project since then. And we've had a few researchers try to help us with that from the med school, but those grants never really went through. So we've been working on our own to change our people's way of eating and way of living and viewing life so that our children are not dying young from type 1 diabetes, which is a big fear right now. And I guess that's all I really have to say. I appreciate everybody that's on the call, and I appreciate the group that put this presentation together. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. I don't know why you guys are small.
What was the name of the documentary? Somebody asked earlier, what was the name of the documentary that you were involved in?
The one that I mentioned, I think, Cheryl, I think you were off camera at that point, was Pakachoag, where the river bends.
Oh, yeah, that was a recent one for, I think Holy Cross was doing a land acknowledgement, actually. It's part of their land acknowledgement activities. Yeah. I think it's on YouTube under the Holy
Yes.
Cross site.
Yeah.
So, but there's lots of documentaries out there for all the tribes. I mean, Nipmuc are not the only tribes. Most of you might not live in this area, but I'm betting that there's a tribe still in existence where you live now.
Cheryl, this is Marcia. Thanks for being here. And I have a question about, I live in Dudley, Massachusetts, and recently got some information about Native Americans being on prayer or pray plantations, and I don't know how to pronounce it in Dudley. They refer to Native Americans at that time as P-E-G-A-N. I don't know how to pronounce it, P-E-G-A-N.
Yes, so Pegans,
Native
Pegans are a band of
Americans.
Nipmuc. Yep. Both my mother and father are descendants from Pegans. Yes. So it's just like, oh, I don't know. Like, so Russia has like different provinces and people are called different things within Russia, right? Different groups of people. It's the same thing. So Pegans were in the Dudley Webster area. It's P-E-G-A-N-S, and Hassanimiscos were sort of right in the Grafton, Millbury area. Wabaquasets down there just where I guess Woodstock would be now, Woodstock, Connecticut. Yeah, so the English gave us the name Nipmuc. Nipmuc just a general term for inland natives, people who live near water, which is we all did. We all lived near lakes and streams and things like that. Because of course we needed water to live, right? But we didn't call ourselves that. Nipmuc's a name given to us. So my ancestry is Hassanimisco and Pegan and Wabaquasit and a whole bunch of other long names that you've probably never heard of. But yeah, so the Pegans were very, very famous, I guess you can say, in the Dudley Webster area. They were the original peoples of that area. And that's when she was talking about the 1869 Enfranchisement Act. It was the reservation that was left there. I think it's probably Webster now, that was sold. And all those people got $63 for each for their land that they had lived on for thousands of years, because it was no longer, they were no longer protected peoples. They were no longer wards of the state. So the state took the land in the name of making us more like everybody else and just sold it. And those people were homeless. So I'm trying to think, it's Lake Street in Webster. Go right up that hill. I think there's a Polish American club there now on the land.
Thanks very much, Cheryl.
Hi, I have a question for Chief Cheryl. Thank you for being with us today. Can you hear me well? My earphones
Yep.
sometimes block out. Okay, thank you. I have a question regarding your. I mean, this is more of a just. I want to hear your opinions and thoughts on this. On the gentrification of Worcester and how like the investment of peoples in Worcester, outside people not like based in Worcester, how you perceive that gentrification further displacing people in Worcester, and like what are things that people at the medical school can do to make, we can't necessarily combat it, but how do we support the native individuals that are from this area that are still here to make whatever happens in Worcester more bearable? That's probably
So-
not the best way to put it, but
Yeah, so that's a really long answer that I don't think I can even get to in this. But so we've been displaced and gentrified since 16 something, right? Since the 1600s. So what's happening now is what has happened in every city, right? The wealthy people see a profit and they move in and they move out the poor people. I mean, it's just what happens. I'm sure there are several agencies and other places that are working. In fact, I do know some names that I can give you that are working to stop that or limit that. I mean, even downtown. So I guess Worcester is building up downtown and they're building all these businesses. They're bringing in all these homes and apartments and condos, but there's not a grocery store in sight. So really the only people that can live there are people that can afford a car that can drive to a grocery store like 5 miles away. So they're deliberately creating a food desert in a major city. So that's a loaded question. I don't really think I can answer fully. But I can give you names of people here in the city that can help you.
yeah, I'll actually just find them. I mostly just wanted to hear your perspective on it. I appreciate you taking the time to answer that question though. Thank you.
I was interested in the history. How would you like to be called? I mean, if Nipmuc was a name that was given to you, then do you like that? Do you feel good about that? Or would you like to see it changed to something else? And the other question I had, that was one. And the second one, I noticed in the northeast part of Massachusetts, it said Massachusetts. So I assume, was there a group there that was given the name Massachusetts, or that was the name that the group had? And so how did the whole state become Massachusetts? And do we want to think about changing that?
Yeah, so there was and there is a group of people called Massachusetts, a tribe of Massachusetts people. And the Boston area, that's what they lived. That was part of their homeland. So I imagine the state was named that way because it was Massachusetts Bay Colony that was centered there in the Boston area. And I'm not sure why the English decided on the name Massachusetts rather than the name Plymouth, because we could have been the state of Plymouth, right? There was a Massachusetts Bay Colony and there was a Plymouth Colony. So that's why it was named that. Massachusetts Bay Colony became Massachusetts, the state. So the people that are called Massachusetts were always called Massachusetts before the English came here. As for your first question, so we call ourselves whatever we call ourselves, I guess. So I can call myself Nipmuc, I can call myself Hassanamisco. I sometimes call myself Pegan. It depends upon where I am, the situation that I'm in. We've not really thought about changing the name Nipmuc. It's just an all-encompassing name. The band that I belong to is called the Hassanamisco Band, but the Nipmuc Nation is kind of like an umbrella for all the bands within it. Do you understand? It's like Europe, like the word Europe.
So I look at this, I mean, when Columbus came, presumably, he saw the indigenous people and he called them Indians because he thought he was in India. And that name has stuck for absolutely out of ignorance. I mean, you should have looked around and said, is this what India looks like? But I think maybe we have to think back and maybe get things back to the way the indigenous people would feel most comfortable being called. And that may mean changing a lot of names too. I mean, here in Massachusetts and in other places in the United States.
Yeah, so I consider myself a Black Indigenous woman. I don't really use the word Indian. So I use Native sometimes and Indigenous. And that's just a generational thing, I suppose. I think my grandparents or great grandparents would have said Indian. So just like now people call us Native American. That's the politically correct statement. But back in the days, we were called American Indian. So when I say we call ourselves Nipmuc and Hassanimisco, so I wouldn't go around saying people, I'm Native American. I would say I'm Nipmuc or I'm from Hassanimisco. So it's just so many degrees there of accommodations that my people make in order to live in the society that you're a major part of. You know what I'm saying? So I have to live in my world as an indigenous person, as a Black person. I also have to live in the greater society of white Americans. So all of those names are just accommodations, really. It doesn't really change who we are or what we believe. It's just a title.
Thank you. So we will be posting the recording of this and any contact information and any information that Chief Holley gives us that she allows us to post. So we will be posting it on our website. I just wanted to make that announcement. And if you want to speak or ask a question, you can type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand as Ruth and Donna and Maggie and Mary have been doing. So Ruth is next, and then after that is Maggie.
Okay. Thank you, Jules. Hi, Cheryl. It's so nice to meet you. Something that has really bothered me, always bothered me, and maybe you can give me a perspective on it, is the reservations. You know, it bothers me that Native Indigenous people have been banished, or in my mind, banished to reservations, and you know, they live in their own little world. And so I wanted to know what your perspective was on that, because in my mind, I'm like, they should be part of this country. They should be integrated into the country. They should have all the benefits. And so if you can give me your perspective on that, I'd really appreciate that.
So the reservations that you speak of are really out west, out Midwest and West. And so I don't want to give my opinion on what other people do or say. So all tribes are different, right? All tribes have different beliefs, living situations, everything is different for them. So our reservation in Grafton, so we're quite happy to have that. It is the only piece of land in all of Massachusetts that has never been owned or stewarded by anyone but Nipmuc people. There's no title, there's no deed. Its existence predates Massachusetts Bay Colony. It predates the English coming over. It predates the French coming. It predates all of that. It's a very, very special piece of land. So we're quite happy to call it reservation. People out west, like you said, they were herded onto these pieces of land that were like worthless, and that's a totally different story. And I don't want to really offer an opinion on other people's circumstances, because what's home to one person might not be home to someone else. Do you know what I mean? So, and as for everybody they have TV, they have internet. Actually, so there's a new television show out that's written and produced and acted by actual Indigenous people from the Midwest. It's called Reservation Dogs. It's on Hulu, I think. FX and Hulu. I'm not sure what that means, but I know it's on Hulu. And it's a very new show. It's only like 4 or 5 episodes in, but it's so authentic. I think you guys should probably look at that, and you'll see that we're actual people. Most people, when they think of Indigenous people, they think of us as some spiritual gurus and romantic type figures. And honestly, we go to the same grocery stores as you do. And we drive the same sort of cars. We watch the same sort of TV shows. I mean, Marvel versus DC Comics, I'm definitely Marvel. You know what I'm saying? We're people as well. But I think you guys should try to take a look at that show and And maybe that will help your perspective on reservations. Because like I said, I really can't, I don't want to speak on someone else's lifestyle.
Thank you.
But thank you for the
Great.
question.
So Donna, you can go next.
Thank you. Hi, Chief Cheryl. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for the organizers of this event. I'm just curious, I want to go back to your earlier statement where you said that with regard to land acknowledgement, that your preference is that it not just be a box checked off, but that it is the beginning of a relationship with an organization. And so I just wanted to ask you, what are some examples of organizations that you've been able to build relationships with, and are we working on anything like that here at UMass beyond simply the acknowledgement? Are we working to build a relationship, and what do you see as positive examples of that? Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. So I was going to ask that question myself as well of the acknowledgement committee. So what's next after you put out this acknowledgement, and then what? Because yeah, like I said, we have health equity, inequity, I should say, and we'd like to see that changed. So we'd like to see something from the med school, some sort of commitment to helping that change happen. Now, who have we worked with since? So right now we're in the middle of acquiring, I guess you can say, 181 acre farm up in Athol. It's called the Farm School. And the Farm School's mission is to connect people to the land. And as part of their land acknowledgement and their change within, they feel that the ultimate act of fulfilling their mission would be to reconnect the original people to that land. And so they're actually giving us that farm with, forest and growing fields for us to grow and distribute food, barns and homes and a dormitory even for programs and things like that. So we've been working with them for years, mind you, and did not know that this was going to happen. And after working with us for years, after having that strong relationship, this is what they decided to do. And not that we're saying that if you want to have a relationship with us, give us 181 acres, but that's a real thing. So they helped us do things on the reservation. Like we have a lot of old trees that they helped us to take down. They cleared paths with us. They did a lot of things with us, things that we wanted and we needed and that we needed assistance on. So that's what I mean by a relationship. It was as a give and take thing. And yeah, that's what I mean. Not just a checkbox, but are you gonna spend time with us, and are we gonna spend time with you, and things like that. Tower Hill Botanical is trying to establish that relationship with us now as well. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And Maggie, you can go next.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is very educational. My question is very Boston centric because our offices are always on the Boston end of Massachusetts, but I was just wondering about your perspective on the Boston Marathon being run on Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah, so there's actually a whole committee. I'm not on that committee, but there's a whole committee of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people talking about that. I realized that it was a coincidence, that they moved it to that weekend, not really thinking about us. So that's only my perspective. I think it's just, I think that it was just, people don't really think about us, you know what I mean? When they plan things, they don't really think about the original inhabitants or really anybody but their own selves. And even Indigenous people do that. Everybody does that, right? You're only thinking about yourself and what you need at that time. So I won't hold that against them. My understanding is that they're supposed to issue an apology to the Indigenous tribes of the state. And that run actually starts in Nipmuc land and goes all through Massachusetts land. But Massachusetts was not included in that committee, which is another failing. So, but other than that, I don't really care too much. I don't run, so.
So
thank you for the question.
it's not really a question exactly, but I know that we've done some research around using storytelling in a sort of a documentary format where we talk to patients from a particular group about their chronic illness or chronic whatever, and get them to tell us what their issues are and what they want to know more about and what they already know about, and sort of if we use the words that they use and things of that nature, we were able to prove through a research study in Alabama for African Americans specifically, but that using the groups to help the groups is really where what really makes a difference. And so this particular group, we had 300 patients, and their blood pressure lowered to the equivalent of like 3 medicines, and it's just from watching DVDs, which are basically the stories of their people, the stories of their fellow people.
That's very good. We have pretty big storytelling traditions. We have a core of storytellers, yeah, in the tribe.
So Parto, if you want to go next.
Sure. I wanted to thank you for telling us a part of your history. I came from another land 42 years ago, and I was always in love with American Native stories because they are the ones who I consider them as first American, and the rest of us are just came afterward. I wanted to know if there any kind of a work between your group and UMass Medical School for alternative medicine or alternative healing, anything like that is happening, or because that's another field that I was always interested in. And I mean, I'm a Reiki master, and I have done a lot of alternative medicines beside my job that it's non-healing at this point, it's just administrative. But I think it's very important, the lessons that you guys can teach the rest of us, and so they won't be forgotten. And not everything new is great. And that I know, because even medicine, they built all those medicine based on all those herbs and the combination of different things, and people lived based on that many years. That's how we end up here. So I just wanted to know if there's anything.
So we don't have anything in connection with the medical school, but we do have several herbalists. We have an apothecary in the Boston area, an apothecary here in the Worcester area, and we distribute herbal remedies to people that way. We have classes and things like that. Our elders recently wanted to reestablish a health group. We used to have something called the Nipmuc Women's Health Coalition. And actually we had 2 conferences at the med school back in the, I think, late 1990s or early 2000s. It was a while ago. So our elders recently wanted to reestablish some sort of health program around that. But yeah, we don't have anything in conjunction with the school. We do our own thing. But we would love to.
I mean, I don't know how we can get UMass involved in it. I'm not a big shot in UMass. I just work here, but I'm sure that there are many big shots in this screens. And so maybe they can help out to connect something with the remaining of people who may be even interested in to get involved, because that's the way of nature.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Right. And Margaret, I see your hand is raised.
Yes. The question about the Boston Marathon and Chief Hawley's response that, they just didn't think of us prompted me to share an experience more than a question. So I grew up in northeastern Connecticut. So lived there, attended the local schools. And in 3rd grade, in the unit on Thanksgiving, that we learned about the Pilgrims and the Native Americans and that whole tradition that most of us are familiar, we were told that there were no longer any Native Americans in New England. So there were Native Americans in the class.
In the
And
town,
I-
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I know them. And I can't speak to what the impact of that statement was on those children in the classroom, but I can speak to the impact it has on me. And I think that if I'm very honest, and if people of my generation are very honest, because it also corresponded with that sort of romanticization of Native Americans that Chief Holley spoke to as well, which even as a child, I kind of sort of recognized that it was cultural appropriation and maybe not really appropriate. But there's a sense of delegitimacy about Native Americans at the very back of my mind. That's the impact it had on me. And I think that if people were very honest, people who went through that educational program with me, that's a legacy of those lessons. And so I think the land acknowledgement is a really good way of sort of challenging that legacy. I just thought I'd share that.
That's a very good way of looking at it. What town did you live in? You think you're on mute.
I thought I unmuted. I grew up in Putnam.
Oh
And
yeah, I know. There's tons of Putnam. Yeah, so the Gould.
The Goulds, yeah. I went to school with
Yeah, those are my cousins and my mother's first cousins. Yeah.
So I can share another story if you want. So when I was in high school, Annette Gould was a good friend of mine, and she shared with me that she had a lot of conflicts about her identity, that her cousins were identifying as Black Americans, were involved in the Black Power movement, but her father was taking her to powwows on weekends, and her father was a very prominent member of the Nipmucs. And you know, as a teenager at that time, I just really didn't know how to grasp that information. I really hope and I think that kids growing up today get a much better experience of understanding diversity, understanding identity, understanding, you know, what those conflicts are and how to share and support their friends, because I really was not able to support her at that time. And it's a lifelong regret that I have, that she felt close enough to me to share that with me, and I did not have any real way of supporting her in that. That's my recollection. Perhaps she didn't feel the same way, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, so that's a conflict that even grown Nipmuc people have to work out amongst themselves. But I think that kids nowadays are so much better at supporting their friends and things like that. It's just so more open. And back then it was such an inner conflict, you know? So thank you though for those stories.
Thank you. And a couple of things, you know, we do plan in the previous conversations that we've had with Chief Holley, we do plan to continue this conversation and sort of use the information from this session, as well as obviously the sessions with Chief Holley, to work in the direction of coming up with a statement, but that won't be the end of it. And I really love the fact that there are several people who are talking about potential collaborations and things like that. So there's a person in the chat that's their name is Bronwyn. They're a fourth-year student, medical student. Bronwyn plus 3 other students started a North American Indigenous Health Interest Group 3 years ago. They're a small group of medical students, but they hope to develop an improved medical school curriculum so that the next generation of providers knows how to provide equitable healthcare that is respectful and truthful. Is there any guidance that you can give us on how we can develop a sensitive, truthful curriculum? And they said, you know, it would be greatly appreciated. And I'm also on the Curriculum Reform Committee, where we're looking at diversity and making sure that we include diversity. So I will follow up with you separately about having additional conversations about how we can include it in our curriculum. But Bronwyn said that they're also itching for collaboration opportunities if anyone would be interested and available to help strengthen the interest group. So would you have any immediate response to that? And then if you want to, we can also add any resources that you give now to the website when the recording is posted.
So are you asking me for a response, Jules?
Yes, if you wanted, yes.
So I work in dermatology. I don't know if you guys knew that, but
No.
so I'm a clinic manager for dermatology. And so one of the things of dermatology is that everything is about white skin, right? And brown or black skin is considered an anomaly and almost like a specialty. And so the last few years, especially since Black Lives Matter, I've just been sort of upset that my own people who I've been with all this time still think I'm an anomaly. You know what I mean? It's skin, right? If you're going to school to learn about skin, you should learn about all skin. Shouldn't be special skin and sometimes skin. It should be all skin, right? So,
absolutely.
Like, I mean, honestly, we all have the same blood, right? So cardiologists looking at the same hearts should be the same with skin. So we actually have a group here now between the research, the derm researchers over there at where you guys are and the clinic here to working on things like that. Making things more equitable, recruiting students of color, med students of color and things like that. So I don't know if the student would like to get in touch with our group here and see what they're doing here, that would be fine. If he's looking for someone from the tribe, we can try. If he sends me his email, I can try to hook him up with someone.
That's wonderful. That's really, really excellent. So we'll make your email available. Since you put it in the chat, we can make your email available to them as well as other folks. There's also a comment from a clinical geneticist. Helen says that they can say that when they meet people in clinic and ask about their ancestry to understand their health risks, people are always so proud if they have a background that is Native. And she would like to help Bronwyn. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And honestly, I would love to help with storytelling. I think that is a really powerful medium. And especially when you combine it with video and it makes it durable so that you don't have to have the same people traipsed into the room to tell the same story. You can sort of make a little like novella almost or something like that. And Bronwyn promises to reach out to to you and to Helen. So if anyone else has any questions, you can raise your hand. It is 12:54, so we are coming to the close. Let's see, there's one message.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So it's really the question that someone else already brought up. So what is the next step after you guys do this acknowledgement? Are you just gonna say, hey, we did it, see you later, or?
No, absolutely not. So this is just the start of the conversation. I am delighted to see so many people join us today. And my hope is to form a committee that's really going to look at the needs of the population before we even start the land acknowledgement. I think that is a very small thing that we can do and we should have already done. But I think it's more important that we start to identify ways that we can be helpful to the people instead of just, like you said, checking a box to say that we have a land acknowledgement at UMass Chan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for Marlena and other people. Is the institution doing anything to note Indigenous Peoples Day, as opposed to Columbus Day? I mean, it's right around the corner, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's also a great first step. As far as I know, there's been nothing done in the past formally.
So the town of Grafton recently changed from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Worcester doesn't seem to be moving in that direction at all. So.
Okay.
that doesn't have to stop us as an institution from moving forward with it, and really, I mean, seeing every event as like a continuation of the conversation, I think is really, really important. And just like today, we learned about different people who are interested in helping in different ways. But also, there's close to 80 people that were on the call that they were just like, they're just interested. They want to know because it means something that that we're here on land that was forcibly taken.
And one of the directions I want to move DIO into is, it's nice to have awareness of things, but what is the action we're going to do after? So every program that we're doing, we're building awareness, but at the same time, we need to have action steps and we need to really center the margins. How do we do a better job of that? So we really appreciate your time today and sharing with us, but this is absolutely not the last step. This is just the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. And we are continuing that theme with other centering the margins throughout the year. Every month we will have a centering the margins conversation. So next, I think Mary Purin has raised her hand if she wants to say.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, or I'm the director of the library. If there are any resources that Chief Holley feels would be important, that can help educate our students, physicians, clinicians, staff here, history of your community, your tribe, or as well, any topics you think that are really important around healthcare inequities and issues, I'd be happy to make sure that we can collect them for our people here, but also, if there are things on your end in terms of health information that would be beneficial, the library can also provide some of those resources for your own community. So I just want to put that out there as something that we can do.
Yeah, there's lots of great books that have been published in the last 5 years that, there's lots of great things. I can send you a list.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. And I see Donna has raised her hand again.
I'm sorry. I'm just it's such an important topic, but I just wanted to mention that that although the history of the land is very important, I think it's also important to acknowledge that we're continuing to alter the land. We've got new buildings going up as we speak, and it would be really wonderful if, as part of this initiative, we could think about a way to acknowledge that as is there a marker we could put on the campus, some way to really acknowledge, we may be disturbing, I don't know what we're disturbing, but really to be purposeful and intentional as we go forward, that in this kind of work. So I know we're short on time, but just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we'll follow up with Chief Holley about that specifically, because that is something that has come up in the past. There's one more comment, but unfortunately we're right out of time, but we will do our best to answer that question in the summary and in the posting about this session, because as we said before, this is the beginning of a conversation. It is certainly not the end. And I really, really, really want to thank Chief Holley for all the emails and things back and forth, and thank the library for putting together that wonderful presentation. And say that, we're really looking forward to this year, at least, focusing on our Black and Indigenous people of color, and sort of how the different topics of the day, like medicine or pipeline programs, Chief Holley mentioned something about that, how those impact the different communities that have traditionally been sidelined. So Dr. Duncan, would you have anything to wrap up, or Chief Holley, would you have anything to wrap up?
I just want to say thank you, Katabato Mission. I appreciate these first steps. And if you have any questions or anything, please reach out to me.
Thank you.
Right. So as I said, we will have this recording available, and we will go through the chat again and rethink about these questions that were asked, and sort of have a not more thoughtful, but an additional conversation about the different topics that were brought up, because there were a lot of really, really good ones. So thank you. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and stop recording.